If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting through my website, emailrevealer.com. Otherwise, you could just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. If you like our show, be sure and check out our Patreon. Go to Opperman Report Patreon. Everything you hear Monday to Friday on AM/FM radio, you could find at Patreon with the commercials cut out, plus exclusive content, court documents, all kind of great stuff at Opperman Report Patreon. Our archives you can find at Spreaker.com. You go to Spreaker.com. I do a live show there every Friday night. There's a chat room. You get an email notification when I put up new content, and it's free to sign up. I'm really excited about our show. I'm excited. I'm kind of depressed about our show today, to be honest with you, man. Fellow Derf BackDerf wrote this book about Kent State. Kent State, 4 dead in Ohio. Now, Derf is normally like a comic strip guy. You can find him at derfcity.com, and he's going to be at the Chicago Alternative Comics Expo June 3rd and 4th. And he also went to school with Jeffrey Dahmer. He wrote another book called My Friend Dahmer. Mr. Derf BackDerf, are you there?
Well, I'm here.
Before we get into the whole book about Kent State, 4 dead in Ohio, tell us about yourself. Who is Derf BackDerf?
Who am I?
Yeah.
I'm a comics creator. Comics, that means I write and draw my own comics. I started out as a strip guy, as you mentioned. Actually, I started out as a political cartoonist, but that didn't last long. I was fired for, as the editor at the time put it, general tastelessness. And I went on to have a strip which ran in those alt-weekly papers. You used to find piles of them in coffee shops all over the country in the 90s. It was called The City, ran in the Village Voice and LA Reader and 150 other papers. And about 12, 13 years ago, I pivoted into books, graphic novels. And I've been doing that for a while, mainly with Abrams books. And I've been, incredibly successful at that, more successful than anything I've ever done, which basically means I wasted the first 30 years of my career, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah, that's how I'm starting to feel, man. But now you wrote for the Village Voice.
My strip appeared in the Village Voice. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I'm from New York. I used to get the Voice all the time. Yeah, before
it was the New York Press before that, too, if you remember that paper.
Indian Press?
New York Press.
New York Press. I do remember New York Press.
Yeah. It was a fun little paper. Great comics.
Yeah, I actually came out of the Yippies in New York City on Bleecker Street.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we had Yipster Times and the Overthrow, those, newsletters, too, as well as newspapers. We used to print them up ourselves, man, right there in the lobby.
DIY era, man. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, a whole different world, right?
Right.
The book, Kent State, has got some great reviews, man, even by Jake Tapper.
That's done very well.
So what do we? Let's see. So much of my audience is young, and they're not even gonna know what Kent State was, or they'll kind of have an impression. Well, there's a couple of guards, kind of trigger happy, and gone wrong, big accident.
Yeah. I mean, that's the challenge, I'm not of that era either. So, I mean, I came of age in the 80s, so the world had changed. But I grew up near Kent, so this was always kind of part of my DNA, the massacre. I mean, it just resonates. It still resonates. And I just recognized it as this really great story, and a story that hadn't been told particularly well over the years. And I thought that I could bring something to it, particularly with visual narrative, because that's never been done before, showing visually how this thing happened. So I decided to take it on, and it took me about 4 years to do. It was a brutal challenge. There were times when I was beating myself up for even undertaking it, but at the end of the day, I think I produced a pretty powerful work. It packs a wallop. I mean, the end of this book is a gut punch. So that's why I did it. The challenge of somehow getting younger readers to understand what the time was like, and which was very different than our time now, mainly because of the draft and the Vietnam War and the lack of technology and just all of these differences. It's a challenge you face with any period piece, but you try to find the humanity there in the story, and you hope that readers latch onto that, and that's what I went for.
Yeah, I'm 60 years old myself, and so I guess I was about 8, 9, 10 years old when this happened. Right. And I remember watching the news those nights, and it was like it was back then you only had 3 TV stations,
Right.
And the little news clip was like a 10-second clip, a couple of National Guardsmen turning around shooting, blah, blah, blah. And I guess it really didn't become well known, because it died down, after that, nationwide, in New York at least.
Yeah, well, maybe.
My life. Yeah.
I think that what happened immediately after the massacre was that the entire nation just stopped dead in its tracks. It was such a stunning event. We'd had violence before then. Certainly, you think of the 1968 Chicago Convention and the battles on the streets in Washington, D.C., and there were some in New York, too.
Oh, yeah.
All over the country. I mean, campuses in 1970 were basically in flames. Inner cities were in flames. So it was not exactly this isolated, event, but that packed a shock that we had not seen before, where soldiers just turned and opened fire into a crowd of unarmed students. That just really hit home. And so there was this horrible gasp, and then after that there was a good month of absolute chaos. The entire higher education system in this country ground to a halt as campuses just exploded all over the country, and most of them were closed. Over something like 450 campuses closed. This entire school year just torched. But when people came back the following fall, you had that summer break, which was really kind of a godsend as far as cooling things off. When people came back, it had changed. The anti-war movement really, I think, lost a lot of steam with the Kent State Massacre, because you had people saying, "Yeah, I'm opposed to the war, but do I want to take a bullet for it?" So there were a lot of factors involved there. There were a lot of moving parts, but no, it definitely continued on, definitely.
Really? Okay, yeah. As a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old.
Well, sure. You weren't on the streets. Neither was I. I was like 9. So.
Yeah. Okay. About the same. Yeah. I definitely didn't get that impression at the time until the Neil Young song came out, and it kind of iconicized it.
It came out that summer.
Describe to us then what happened that day, because in your head you think, well, the kids were rioting and they were out of control, but really no, and the odds were pretty much even too. As many National Guards as there were kids.
Well, protesters, yeah, the Guard outnumbered the protesters. I mean, what you have to understand was, everything you believe about this story, there was these massive riots and the campus was out of control and the Guards came in and then some quote unquote accident happened. All of that is not true. The campus was a campus of 23,000 students. I mean, it's a big university, big state university. Rolling Stone at the time called it the nation's largest unknown university.
Yeah.
And there was a very active protest community there, which had largely been crushed but there were still some remnants around. So there were, a couple hundred anti-war activists that had caused some trouble the previous nights. There had been some window smashing on the main street downtown, mainly banks. They targeted banks. It was, banks fund the war, et cetera, et cetera. And then the following night, they torched the ROTC building on campus, which had been a target for years. And a number of ROTC buildings were attacked during this school year because it was, the Pentagon's presence on campus, right? I mean, that was just kind of what was happening at the time. It was these anti-war radicals against the Pentagon, against the war machine, and all of this stuff. So it's a very complicated scenario leading up to this. There's like 8 years of backstory. But when these things just started escalating, it was like a runaway train. And the governor sent in the Guard because he wanted to make a big show of force. He was posturing to his base. It all came back down to politics and image. And so we sent in the Guard because he wanted to just crush everyone. But the university is open. There's 23,000 kids there. You've got 200 kids who are protesting and 22,000 kids who aren't. They're just going to class. And through this is marching 1,200 soldiers with bayonets and tear gas and clubbing everyone in sight. And it was just a total debacle. And then at some point on May 4, 1970, as they were trying to chase this group of protesters off campus, a group of the Guard turned and opened fire into a parking lot full of 500 students, most of whom had books in their hands as they were walking back and forth to class. And it was 4 dead, 9 shot and wounded, 5 of them wounded critically. It was a slaughter. And no one knows why they opened fire. There was a massive cover-up afterwards, and they got away with it. And it's an open wound to this day.
What exactly was the cover-up? Who gave the order? Because 4 guys turned out.
Gave the order, yeah. Why did they shoot?
Yeah.
Was it premeditated? I mean, the strong suspicion was that it was, at least maybe by about 10 minutes, but that's still premeditated. And why did they shoot? And why did they shoot into a crowd of students? Were they aiming for someone in particular and missed? Did they just screw it up? Was it malevolence? Was it a combination of all those things? No one really knows. Because these shooters, and there's only about 12 of them, have never talked. It's total code of silence. And some of them have gone to the grave with their secrets.
And I believe, too, that the guardsmen actually had to stop and turn around in order to stop.
Yeah, they wheeled as one.
Yeah.
There was an order to fire. And who gave it, we don't know. Whether it was just one officer, whether it was a couple, we really don't have those details. Remember, the technology of the time is not like the technology now. Now you'd have like 16 different cell phone cameras.
Yeah.
Or probably more like 160 different cell phone cameras filming this stuff. Back then, there's no film footage of the Guard itself opening fire. There's a lot of still photography, but that doesn't show that much. So we just don't know. And there were a lot of lies. There was all kinds of, the cover-up included, immediately after the shooting, some of the guardsmen ditched their guns, some of them reloaded their clips. The armory records disappeared and never returned again. The guardsmen lied to investigators about whether they had shot or not. They fabricated evidence. All kinds of stuff. This is not the behavior of innocent people, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have a reason to lie, why would you lie? Why don't you just tell the truth? The truth is the easiest thing to tell. So there has to be a reason why you lie. But, that's as far as we get.
Now, who even would come in and investigate this if you have National Guardsmen shooting unarmed U.S. civilians?
Right.
Who comes in and investigates? State police, FBI? Who comes in and investigates this?
Immediately afterward, it was the Guard itself. They did a shooting
review,
investigation, a review because shots were fired, and then the FBI came in and noted that the guardsmen were all lying to them. And then there was such pressure and there was such outrage that a federal presidential commission was set up called the Scranton Commission. Now, of course, this was Nixon, but it was surprisingly frank, and they came in and investigated everything that had happened too. So there was a number of investigations, which led to actually some indictments, but they were purposely weak indictments. Again, we're getting back to Nixon, who is just Machiavellian, right? And he wanted to pander to both sides. He wanted it to appear that he was, being impartial. Well, of course, he had no intention of being impartial. And privately, he was quite gleeful that anti-war protesters had been shot.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
So it just kind of progressed from there. It took roughly, the lawsuits and the investigations and the countersuits, that went on for about 10 years.
Yeah, I wrote down as one of the questions, civil suits. What happened with civil suits?
The parents of the 4 kids who were shot and the wounded all sued the guardsmen, and the governor of Ohio. And eventually it was thrown out of court by a federal judge. He dismissed it. But it led to some really great discovery and deposition, and people were obviously lying under oath and all kinds of stuff. So at least we have documentation. That's the one useful thing that came out of that, and it's a lot of documentation. I spent a great deal of time digging through those materials.
And did you include a lot of that stuff in the book? My audience loves that kind of stuff. Documents.
Yeah, it's all in there. There's like 24 pages of footnotes at the back. I know when you think of a graphic novel, you don't think of, meticulous research, but that's kind of my thing. My degree is actually in journalism, and I came up through newspapers, so it's just my natural tendency. But graphic narrative has a real potential for showing events and showing them narratively and visually, and it's a visual world. So these things are important, and it packs a lot more emotional power when you see that as a narrative. The way I structured the story is that I show it entirely through the eyes of the 4 kids who were shot and killed. That was Sandy Scheuer, Jeff Miller, Bill Schroeder, and Allison Krauss. The youngest was 19, and the oldest was 21. And so I show, as the events unfold over these 4 days, I show it entirely through the eyes of one of them. All of them were there, maybe more than one, at every pivotal event in the story. And so the reader is right on the ground with them, right by their shoulder. And we walk through these events with them, and we get to know them. And so when they're cut down, it packs a wallop.
So now these 4, were they activists? Were they leaders?
No. One of them was, Allison was a committed anti-war activist, but
Krauss.
She was not, Allison Krauss. She was the youngest. But she was not a member of SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, which was the radical group that was blamed for a lot of this. She was not a radical. She was nonviolent. So she was really the only one. The others were all just kind of, observers or bystanders. Actually, Bill Schroeder, one of the guys shot, was a ROTC cadet.
Wow.
He was in ROTC. Now, he was a very thoughtful guy, and he was really questioning everything. But he was not, he was not on the other side of the rampart. And Jeff was who was often described, he looked like a radical. He had the big bushy yippie hairdo like Abby Hoffman.
Right.
And, he looked like a crazy hippie, but he was actually a very smart kid, very, very artistic, very, very thoughtful as well. And he was likely taking part in his first protest. He had finally gotten off the sideline and said, now I have to take a stand today. He told his roommate. And, those are the last words his roommate heard him speak, because he was shot dead a few hours later. So no, they were not. They did not fit the archetype at all, which is another reason I wanted to get into this. It's everything that people believe about this event is probably not accurate, outside of 4 people being killed.
Yeah, I'm surprised how much I'm learning today, because I was trying to book this show years ago with Bill Kunstler's daughter. And,
oh, cool.
Yeah, and someone who's related to Krauss. I guess because her name is, I know one of the women we were supposed to interview with this was named Krauss. And then Bill Kunstler's daughter as well.
Well, might be Allison's sister.
Yeah,
Laura.
probably a sister, yeah. Yeah. Now, but the 12 guards were never identified.
Oh, they were identified.
Oh, they were?
Oh, yeah, we know who they were. But, and like I said, 6 of them were indicted. The ones that prosecutors identified as shooting into the crowd, even though they deny that they did. And they picked targets and they opened fire, and it was brutal. I mean, Jeff was shot through the mouth.
Wow.
230 feet away. As he yelled, "Guard off campus," they shot him through the mouth, and he was killed instantly. He was dead before he hit the pavement. Sandy Scheuer was shot in the neck as she walked to class, severed her jugular. She died within minutes. Allison Krauss was hit in the back. That's the other important thing. So was Bill Schroeder, is that most of these kids who were shot in the back. The majority of them were shot in the back. And the guard insisted that, we feared for our lives because they were charging us up the hill. They were charging up backwards. Mm. And the nearest kid who was shot was 60 feet away. He was shot because he had a sandwich in one hand, which, of course, is every terrorist has a sandwich in the hand. And he was flipping off the guard in the other hand, and they shot him twice. And the nearest who was killed was Jeff. He was 230 feet away. The farthest was Bill. I think he was like 370 feet away. That's the length of a football field.
Yeah.
And the farthest kid who was shot was over 700 feet away. He was shot through the neck, just randomly. So the guns they shot, they were using M1s. M1s. That was the gun that Patton used in World War I for the Third Army. It had a range of 2 miles. It's a combat weapon. And why they have these loaded M1s facing off against unarmed kids, 19-year-old kids, is the great mystery, the great mistake.
Yeah, even today, the rules of engagement overseas, they would not be allowed to shoot first.
That, my friend, is the legacy of Kent State.
Oh, really?
Yes, sure it is. We have spent 53 years now developing and deploying a vast array of crowd control weaponry that is non-lethal because of what happened at Kent State and Jackson State, which was 2 weeks later when 2 kids were shot. We want to crush them, but we don't want to kill them because that doesn't play well with the public. It's all PR. So we've spent really trillions developing this stuff, and we have at our disposal all these crowd control weapons that they did not have in 1970. The Ohio National Guard was horribly equipped. It was all Army hand-me-downs from the Korean War and World War II. And they had bayonets, they had clubs, they had gas.
Wow.
That's about it. They didn't even, they didn't have any of the stuff we have now, like sound cannons and heat guns. They didn't really have the techniques, the shields, the body armor. They didn't have any of that.
Yeah, even the average cop on patrol today with the body armor and the tasers and all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
not that they're non-lethal, but
yeah, it's such a different world, man. But now you mentioned Jackson State. Now I hadn't even heard of Jackson State, and I'm pretty much I'm on the cusp of this kind of stuff. What happened at Jackson State?
Jackson State is a black college in Mississippi, where 2 weeks later there was a small anti-war riot. Not a riot, I'm sorry. I misspoke there. March They marched into town, they marched back, and they were hanging out in front of their dorm, and the State Highway Patrol came up, and for reasons known only to them, opened fire and blasted out every window in the dorm, and 2 kids were killed. And there was also a cover-up there. So, as you would imagine, in Mississippi there would be.
Yeah.
And no one was ever punished for that one either. So, yeah.
So now, in your research for this book, Kent State 4 Dead in Ohio, by Derf BackDerf, were there any indications that this could have been a whole planned scenario from up on high in advance of even that day? Hey, let's make an example of some of these college punks and show them, put them in their place?
No, I found no evidence of that whatsoever. I mean, what it was politics in play. And certainly that wasn't being publicized, obviously, but the governor of Ohio, a guy named Jim Rhodes, who was a law and order strongman. He was a Nixon ally, a man who was incapable of forming a grammatically correct sentence, but was one of the shrewdest, most ruthless politicians this state has ever had, and that's a high bar. He was just, it was all political theater to him, and he had absolutely no concern about the students who were there. They were all just pawns to him. So, I mean, that's as far as conspiracy, quote unquote, goes. There were certainly, that time, specifically on Kent State, there were certainly a lot of players on campus. The FBI was there in force. We know military intelligence was there filing reports back to the Pentagon. We know that the CIA was probably likely there, though that stuff is still classified. And all of the local law enforcements were all there. But they were all stumbling all over each other. None of them were working together. And they were often working at cross purposes. So it was more a combination of, political theater and blithering incompetence than it was some conspiratorial scheme.
Yeah, and I'm sure there was some COINTELPRO infiltration there as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Kent SDS, which was very radical and very active, had been thoroughly infiltrated by the FBI and by other federal entities, as had every chapter in the country. I mean, the FBI boasted of that in the day, J. Edgar Hoover. So, yeah, that was definitely happening. And the CIA was up to a lot of bad stuff, too. It was something, their version of COINTELPRO, which was called Operation Chaos, which was even worse. But we don't know the details because it's still classified. Because in the early 80s, when it was exposed by Seymour Hersh, the guy who exposed the My Lai massacre, when it was exposed, there were congressional hearings. And the director of the CIA was with Reagan at that time, went before Congress and begged them to give the CIA a waiver from, releasing this stuff, because, as he said at the time, if the American public knew what we had been up to, it would spell the end of the agency. And, at the depths of the Cold War, Congress decided we needed the CIA more than we needed the truth, so that stuff's still classified. But we can imagine, because COINTELPRO is all out there.
What do you think? Do you think the oppression was greater then than it is today, or do you think it's worse today?
I'm not a psychologist. I don't pretend to be one, even on TV. I have no idea.
No, not depression, oppression.
Oppression.
The government oppression.
I see.
And the financial forces out there that oppression.
It was a different kind of oppression because we didn't have, now we have so much technology that we can do it without anyone knowing that it's being done, right? Mm. All the snooping, all the everything else. But and because of the Patriot Act, they get away with it. And the Patriot Act was basically passed because when COINTELPRO blew up, all those FBI guys went to prison, and everything had to be released, and it was a huge backlash. Well, the Bush administration basically made all that stuff legal, So it would never happen again. So yeah, it's a different kind of oppression.
Yeah.
There's a lot of more, I think, corporate oppression now. You face backlash from that, economic backlash. I don't know. I mean, it's a different time. It's 50 years later.
Yeah.
But oppression is oppression. I mean, however it's delivered, it's still there.
Yeah, back in 1970, no picture on your driver's license. It was a piece of paper, a little car, bank book had no picture on it. No.
That's right. Yeah, you could vanish pretty easily in 1970. Now it takes a lot more work.
Yeah, I didn't sign up for the selective service until I was 25.
I didn't even have to.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I didn't have to either. Carter set it up when I was about 18.
Right. Yeah, because of the hostage crisis. Yeah, I was in that little window after the end of the Vietnam War and before that, where we didn't even have to register.
And I bet you could drink at 18 too, right?
We could drink at 18.
Yeah, me too, man. We drank at 16. Yeah. You can get into the bar at 16 years old in high school.
Well,
what about the students who were eyewitnesses? Did they organize and were they able to present their perspective to the nation?
Well, they still are. God bless them. I mean, they're all in their 70s now. We've lost quite a few of them. That's natural. But they just held a commemoration on campus on the 4th, and as they do every year, and they have every year, virtually since the shootings. And they're still out there trying to get the word out, but they've often been mocked and dismissed over the years, by the crowd that yells "Get over it."
Yeah.
And it's really easy to say, but get over what? The line in the Neil Young song is, "What would you do if you saw her dead on the ground?" Well, these people literally did see her dead on the ground. And, they're combat veterans, and they're carrying around that PTSD to this day. I can't tell you how many interviews I had with some of the students in 1970 where it ended with them in tears. It's still a very, very emotional wound for them.
Well, then what about yourself? What about Derf BackDerf? Did you suffer any PTSD sitting through these conversations and watching videos and things? Well,
it's very moving. I mean, I'm focusing on the story. I mean, my story is that the National Guard unit that went to Kent State the week before was in my hometown. I lived in this small town outside of Akron, which is near Kent. And there was a trucker strike at some truck depots by the highway, and the authoritarian governor, again posturing to his base, sent in the National Guard to crush the Teamster strike. And so they lined the streets of my hometown. I remember the school bus, going down this gauntlet of guardsmen on either side of the road with bayonets drawn. And the bus driver made us lie on the floor of the bus as we drove through this, as if that would have made any difference, And, they camped right across from my elementary school. I mean, these things really hit home in 1970, as a kid. It was as if this entire world that I'd been seeing play out on television, the classic, the war spilling into your living room. It's as if that entire world just like suddenly rushed in. And that was the moment when that happened. It happens to everybody eventually at some point in their lives. They become aware of the outside world. And that was mine. And then 2 days later, that unit was pulled out of my hometown and rushed to Kent. And some of those same soldiers opened fire on the hill. So that's my connection to this story. It's a loose connection, but, it's probably the reason why I've carried it around with me for so many years.
Now, I'm looking through your body of work here on Amazon, and most of it is like comic strips, they call it, right? Not cartoons, comic strip type stuff. Then it seems like you start getting serious. You did the thing, My Friend with Dahmer, and you did this thing about Trashed, I guess that's about the ecology.
Yeah, it's based on my career as a garbage man, actually.
Okay, I didn't look that deep into it.
I did after high school for a year. So it's this deep dive into, this garbage secret world, vast secret world of trash and garbage and dumps and all of his stuff. Yeah, it's an environmental, but that's a kind of a rollicking comedy. So My Friend Dahmer obviously is not. That's the true story of my teenage friendship with the strange boy who would grow up to be the next Jack the Ripper. And then Kent State is obviously a tragedy as well. So I do flip back and forth between the genres, the forms.
But it seems like this is your most serious work yet, right, Kent State?
Well, My Friend Dahmer is not exactly light.
Okay, but I'm like activist-wise or journalist-wise.
Oh, sure, yeah. This is the most ambitious work I've ever done. Yeah.
And then, is that your plan going forward now?
Could be. My next book is also nonfiction, so yeah, that one's. But then I'd like to do fictional comedy again too. I want to limit myself to any one style, any one narrow focus. It's wherever the story leads me. If I identify a good story, I'll go for it.
And if people want to go down to the Chicago Alternative Comic Expo on June 3rd and 4th, and they want to meet you, what are they going to find there?
Well, it'll be a large room full of comics creators like myself, and selling some pretty interesting work. Lots of graphic novels, lots of real fun stuff. And I'll be leading some seminars and giving some talks and signing books and just having a good time. Yeah, I highly recommend going to the show. It's a great show.
And what was your experience growing up with Dahmer?
We were friends from 7th grade to the end of high school. And 2 weeks after high school graduation, he killed his first victim.
Wow.
So I was a witness, even though I didn't realize what I was witnessing, to that spiral down, as he got darker and darker and humanity fell off him in chunks. It's really kind of it's a story about the making of the monster. And that's all also heavily researched. I did a lot of interviews and, delved into all the materials that were available at the time. So I'm trying to piece together what happened from the perspective of a contemporary, and that's the story.
Do you think he had the same experience as you on that bus and seeing the National Guard lining up both sides of the street and shooting the next day? Was he affected by that? That's
a good question. I'm not sure. He never talked about it. Some of us did from time to time, but he never brought that up. No, I don't know.
Okay. And what about you hear these stories about I think it was at the prom or something like that. His prom date said he was doing Ouija boards and a seance or something.
No, that was later. That was a party after graduation that there was a Ouija board that came out. Yeah, but I wasn't at that party. I had already left town by that point.
Okay.
All right. I had a aborted attempt at college there for 6 months, so I was absent during that period. And then I came home and was a garbage man.
What did you want to study in college?
Originally, comics.
Comics, yeah.
Originally, and then of course I went back and studied journalism. But originally I went to art school and that didn't work out, so I came home.
And was Dahmer a fan of your comics? You must have been doing it in high school, right?
I have a number of comics that I drew about Dahmer. I mean, I've got high school work with him in it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty spooky stuff. Some of that's in the book. Some of that was printed in the book. Yeah, it's crazy. But,
yeah, that's the wildest thing. And what about?
I know it is, but when I give talks about this, sometimes I'll go to high schools and talk about it because it's a popular book in high school. Taught in the curriculum, and I'll say, look, imagine, put yourself in my shoes. Look to the person next to you. Now imagine that 13 years later you find out that person killed 17 people. I mean, how would you respond? I mean, you just can't imagine these things happening when they're actually happening. So, like I said, my stance is, sometimes monsters just happen.
Yeah, he actually killed more than 12,000 National Guardsmen. Now, 1,200 at least.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. Yeah. For different reasons, though. I mean, the motivation is the key there.
Now, what about those stories you hear about animal abuse and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, dead animals.
Yeah.
They were all true. Yeah.
So he was into that kind of stuff.
Yep, he sure was.
Wow. And did you think anything? I guess at the time we didn't know that that was an indication of a future serial killer, right?
No. Well, we didn't really know what he was doing. I mean, he did that all secretly. There was stuff happening that was later pinned on Dahmer, and when we found that out, it was like, oh, jeez. Yeah, of course. But at the time, we had no idea what it was,
That's so true. You look back, it's like, well, that was right in my face. What was I thinking? Yeah,
exactly. And the experience was, I mean, just imagine you're kind of stumbling along in life. You're 29 years old or whatever I was, 31 years old, and then suddenly, just like that, my entire personal history is rewritten.
So true.
And all of that high school stuff that I thought was one thing was actually something completely different. And so, that really messed me up for a while.
Yeah, I can imagine. How did you find out? What, on the news? You're just watching TV and you saw your old friend?
No, my wife called me. Yeah, she worked at a newspaper at the time, so she was a reporter. She called me and said, this guy you went to school with killed all these people. And, cut him up and did all kinds of things. I mean, we didn't know the full details then, or even how many he had killed. And Dahmer was actually my second guess.
Really?
Yeah.
From the same high school?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Were they friends? Was he friends with Dahmer?
Yeah, he was.
Oh, really? So in this group, there was two guys, you think that...
Yeah.
Wow. You think we should be keeping an eye on that other guy, or what?
I know what he's doing. I do keep an eye on him.
You keep an eye on him. I keep an eye on people, too, man. That's how much of people I keep an eye on. Oh, my God. What a life, Derf.
Yeah, it's there are stories in everybody's life. You just have to find them. That was certainly an unusual one. I mean, that one kind of dropped from the sky and fell in my lap.
But now you're saying that your book, My Friend, what is it called, My Friendship with Dahmer?
My Friend Dahmer.
My Friend Dahmer. That's not the one we saw on Netflix.
No. My book was made into its own movie called My Friend Dahmer, which premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2016, I think. It got pretty good reviews. You can find it online.
I think I saw it. I saw that one on Tubi. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's on Tubi. It's on Film Rise and things like that. It pops up all over the place. Good film.
Now, is that the one that would show Dahmer doing convulsions and stuff in the high school? Okay, yeah, I saw it. That's a great film. Okay.
Thank you. That's my book.
Well, excellent. I can't read as good as I could in the old days. My contact lenses in my eyes. Yeah.
Well, in the book is, of course. Forgive me, Mark Myers, the filmmaker. The book is much better. But
then why don't you tell me, what did they leave out of the film that's in the book?
Well, I mean, you just can't. You can't have that kind of. I mean, the book covers like 6 years, right? So, I mean, you can't do that in an independent film. You'd need like 4 different actors. They just didn't have the budget or the time to fully recount it. So it's but they capture the spirit of the book very well, and I was very happy with it. And it was the movie that I thought, okay, if someone's going to make a movie, I want it to be this kind of movie, and they delivered.
What about you hear that odd story about that trip to Washington, D.C.? Were you on that? Yeah, were you on that trip?
No, I wasn't, but I had friends who were.
And so why don't you describe that trip to us from your perspective?
They went to some kind of civics trip to Washington, D.C., and they were touring Congress, visiting the congressional delegate from Ohio or whatever it was. And Jeff and another of my friends and another classmate were just out walking around, and they thought, well, who can we go see? And they decided to go see the vice president, Walter Mondale. And they called the office up, said, we're a bunch of honor students from this and this high school. Can we come in for a tour? And they said, well, sure. Why, of course, great photo op. So they went in and they were getting a tour of the office, and suddenly Walter Mondale came barreling in through one of the doors and said hello, and then that was it. That was the encounter. But you had the Vice President of the United States and Jeffrey Dahmer in the same room, which is pretty damn surreal.
Well, yeah. Well, wasn't John Wayne Gacy, posed next to Rosalind Carter?
I have no idea. I'm not an expert on serial killers. I actually have a lot of tolerance for that kind of fandom. Obviously, I'm a little too close to it. So.
No, yeah, I get plus the whole true crime world is just so online, especially, just so brutal, you know.
Oh yeah, I know.
It's just. But did Jeffrey have that kind of reputation for taking that kind of initiative, saying, "Hey, I'm going to get on the phone and arrange this kind of trip"? Was that something?
Yeah, he was pretty fearless. Yeah, he
Really?
did have that reputation. Yeah,
Smart guy.
he was a smart guy. His dad was a chemist, research chemist, as was mine. They knew each other, in fact. Yeah, oh sure. And yeah, no, he was I mean, he could have easily been an honor student, but you know, his brain just fell apart. I mean, whatever it was that was within him just came bubbling up from the, you know, the crankcase oil of his psyche and just took him over body and soul, and he was lost.
Yeah. Just think, man, the dissension, you know, to get to a place like that with the stench of human bodies in your home like that.
I have no idea what he got off on. It's just truly ghastly. But you know, it's a great story, and that was really my connection to it. I immediately recognized, my God, this is a story that no one else is telling, and I can do something with this that's really going to be something special. And so it took me a while, but I did, and that book really, it landed pretty big. I mean, it's a huge international bestseller. It's in 17 languages, I think 16 languages.
Well, it seems like all your books have up 5 stars, 4.5 stars. You know,
yeah,
everything's reviewed great.
I've done very well with my books. Like I said, it did. You know, I wasted the first 30 years of my career doing other things, but I'll stick with this until the end.
Oh yeah, even Kent State's been translated into Portuguese. Yeah, okay, and that book's really...
French, Portuguese, Finnish, Catalonian, Spanish. What else? Italian. Let's see. Kent State has about 7 or 8. It'd have more, except the pandemic hit just as it came out, so that kind of screwed everything up. But
yeah. And what about your website, derfcity.com? What are we going to find there?
You'll find comics. You'll find an old blog. You'll find links to other things. But I don't think anybody really has a website that does a lot anymore.
Yeah. Now back to Kent State. We said that Fort Denton, Ohio, was like your most serious work, your most journalistic work. But and you hinted around that you're working on something now. Can you tell us what that is?
Well, I really can't. It's just been announced. It'll also be for Abrams Books, but it's another period piece, different period. It'll have more oppression, more politics. So I'm getting into that. But I found a really interesting story, and I'm looking forward to telling that.
Gotcha. Okay, and what about your life as a garbage collector? What was that like?
Garbage man. Well, for a year, art school dropout, working as a garbage man in his hometown for a little over minimum wage. You might as well just painted a big red L on my forehead as I walked around. But, it was a life-changing experience. I say it all the time, that garbage made a man out of me. And when I got off that truck, I was bound and determined not to get back on that truck. So I was very motivated when I went back to school. But yeah, it was amazing experience, amazing insight into this secret world. The amount of trash that we throw away every year, just staggering. And it's a wonderful system because it disappears. You put it out, it's gone. Not so much in New York City. I mean, it kind of lurks around always, but in any other town, it just vanishes and nobody thinks about it again. But that stuff goes somewhere. And you have, these vast landfills all over the country that, thousands of them that are 300, 400 feet deep and just cover huge acreage. It's just a sea of garbage. And let me tell you something, when you drive down into that thing on your truck, to dump your load, and you get out and you're just surrounded by hills of garbage and you're sinking up to your knees in trash, it changes you. You realize, wow, this is not sustainable. So that's what the book is about. It's just a look at that world.
So true. I grew up in Staten Island, where we had the Fresh Kills landfill, the largest landfill in the planet.
Yep.
Yep, and I was on the board of our condo association when I was a young man, like 19 years old, and we did part of the study to close the landfill. And
Sure.
You're right, man. It's an overwhelming, an overwhelming problem.
Right. I think Puente Hills in L.A. eventually surpassed Fresh Kills.
Oh, really?
That's also closed, but that landfill's so large it had its own climate. It had its own weather system that rotated above it.
Fresh Kills.
No.
Puente.
Puente Hills in L.A.
Oh, I didn't know that, man. Well, we accept the challenge. Staten Island Boys will get together. But I tell you, what a contrast, because growing up in New York City, the Department of Sanitation was a plum job, man. If you get, especially around that time in the 80s, I suppose, right? You were working in sanitation?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's $70,000, Department of Sanitation. And the thing was, they would hire you and retire you. You'd go there, you'd hurt
They were union. See, I wasn't union, so that was the big difference there. Those guys were, thank God, because I wouldn't want to do that for 30 years.
Well, no, you worked for 5 years, and you hurt your back, and then they put you on disability, man. And everybody did it, man. Everybody. And then, of course, we have the private sanitation industry, which is a whole other story.
That's a whole other, and then you have the construction.
Yeah.
Disposal industry, and of course the mob's involved in all this stuff, and it's just the billionaire oligarchs are involved. I mean, it's big money.
Yeah, absolutely, man. People have no idea.
No, they have no idea, which is why I did the book, to kind of demonstrate this visually using, all kinds of things, graphics and diagrams, and, then this kind of rollicking, crazy story about what happens on the back of a garbage truck, all the stuff that happens, which is just insane. Garbage bags exploding and, maggots and just all of this really disgusting stuff, which is very funny, as terrifying as it is. And so I combine all that into this book. And that book did very well, too. So it was a lot of fun.
We got about 1 minute left. We've been talking about Kent State, 4 dead in Ohio, and also, too, about your friend, my friend Dahmer, and your trash book. What would you like to leave us with in the last minute?
Read comics.
Yeah.
It's an incredible art form. It's an incredible storytelling form, and we're in a golden age of great comics right now. I'm not talking about superhero crap. I'm not talking about, Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm talking about serious books that are written by very talented people on a number of topics, and it's just an amazing art form.
Derf BackDerf. You can find him on Twitter, Instagram under the name Derf BackDerf, DERF, and then back is BACK. DerfCity.com is the website. You want to meet him in person, Chicago Alternative Comic Expo, June 3rd and 4th. Mr. BackDerf, man, I'm interested in your next book, man. When you finish it, I'm curious.
Am I.
Okay, great. But I'm curious. You got my curiosity piqued.
Good.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed.
Good night.
Bye.